Have you ever done it, made that tough call to cut someone out of your life, and instead of feeling all the drama or loneliness you're supposed to feel, you just felt peace? If that's you, you're definitely not alone. And believe it or not, there's a really deep psychological reason for it. So let's get into it.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You look down at your phone, you see that name pop up, and this little voice inside you just says, not today, not anymore. And in that one decision, everything changes. But the real question is, what exactly changed inside of you?
And this leads us to this really interesting contradiction. We hear it all the time. We're living in this supposed epidemic of loneliness. But for you, creating distance actually brought this incredible sense of calm. That's what I call the paradox of peace.
So, on one side, you have the U.S. Surgeon General telling us we're in a crisis of social isolation. The whole world is shouting that connection is the answer to everything. But then, there's your own experience, which is telling a completely different story, isn't it? That quiet that came after you made that choice, it didn't feel empty. It felt like relief.
So this is a big question you have to ask yourself. Because, let's be real, you probably weren't always this way. There was a time when you were the one who always picked up, the one who always showed up no matter what. So, when did that change? When did you become the person who could walk away and not look back?
That shift, that moment you stopped answering that call, what if I told you that wasn't a sign of weakness? That it wasn't you failing at a relationship? It was actually your biology, your own body, kicking in with this powerful, ancient protective mechanism.
Okay, so what's the science behind this? Well, it's rooted in something called polyvagal theory from Dr. Stephen Porges. And it basically says our nervous system has different gears it can shift into. When we are just constantly overwhelmed and drained, it can shift into something called the dorsal vagal response. Think of it as a biological shutdown mode.
So, to put it really simply, your brain isn't broken. It's brilliant. It saw that your energy, which is absolutely a finite resource, was being constantly depleted. And so it did its job. It flipped a protective switch. This wasn't you giving up. This was your nervous system stepping in to save you.
But that begs the question, right? Where did your brain even learn that this kind of shutdown was a good strategy? Well, for a lot of us, the answer goes way back to our earliest experiences, to a blueprint that was drawn a long, long time ago.
There's a concept from psychologist Dr. Murray Bowen called emotional cutoff. And it describes what happens when a kid grows up in an environment where closeness is, well, it's unpredictable, where love might come with a side of tension. You pretty much learn how to read a room before you even learn how to read a book.
And this is the most important thing to get. This isn't a character flaw. It's a highly sophisticated survival blueprint. Your younger self figured out that sometimes distance equals safety, and that lesson got wired in deep.
Okay, this brings us to a really crucial distinction we have to make. It's so important to understand the difference between healthy self-protection and just building walls that lead to true harmful isolation. Because trust me, they are not the same thing.
And making that distinction really, really matters. I mean, the CDC is very clear that long-term unwanted social isolation is physically dangerous. It increases the risk of heart disease by 29% and stroke by 32%. But, and this is the part people forget, being surrounded by the wrong people can be just as damaging.
So how can you tell the difference in your own life? Well, think of it this way. Walls are built from fear. They're non-negotiable. They block everyone out. Boundaries, on the other hand, are built from self-awareness. They're selective. They're less like a wall and more like a gate. And you are the gatekeeper.
So here's it is, the simplest, most powerful test you have. Just use your own feelings as data. If you created distance from someone and the overwhelming feeling that washed over you was peace and relief, that's not isolation. That is your own protection system working perfectly.
Now, let's take this a step further. What if that instinct you have, that sensitivity that told you to put up a boundary, what if it isn't a weakness at all? What if it's actually a highly developed skill? Kind of like a superpower you didn't know you had.
Think about it. You don't make these big decisions randomly. You make them because you have become an absolute expert at spotting patterns. You see the cycles coming a mile away. That friend who only calls when they need a favor. The family member whose compliments always have a price tag. The partner who pulls you in close just to push you away. You see the whole game.
And this isn't just a hunch. There's real science here. A 2023 study in Nature Neuroscience found that early emotional stress can actually make the brain's threat detection regions more active later in life. You're not paranoid. You're literally processing social information on a much deeper level than most people. So what this all means is that we need a whole new vocabulary for what you're experiencing. The words we normally use, like isolated or withdrawn, they just don't fit. They imply that something is missing, that there's a lack.
Let's redefine things. Loneliness, that's the painful absence of the connection you want. But solitude? That is the peaceful presence of yourself, a state that you have intentionally chosen. See the difference? What you have isn't a lack of something. It's the presence of something beautiful.
Now, people who don't get it might say you're running away. But you know the truth, don't you? You're not running from them. You're running toward a peace. You're running toward clarity. You're running toward a life that finally feels gentle instead of constantly chaotic. You're not isolating. You're building a sanctuary.
Making the choice to protect your own energy, to build a life that actually feels good to you, that's not weakness. That is one of the quietly fiercest, most courageous things a human being can do. Period.
And look, if you need any more proof, the legendary 75-year Harvard study on happiness found exactly what you've already figured out on your own. The real key to a happy life isn't the number of friends you have, it's the quality of those connections. A small, safe, supportive circle is worth so much more than a huge one that drains you dry.
So I'm just going to leave you with this one last thought to chew on. What if carefully curating a small, peaceful circle of people isn't a sign that you failed at being social? What if it's the ultimate proof that you've succeeded at building a life that is truly, authentically your own?